This is the output for our dependent t-test to compare Colgate versus AIM on the number of new cavities. And the first box is just showing you some descriptive statistics. The mean number of new cavities in the Colgate group versus the AIM group. Remember that we have 10 children in this study, so an N of 10, and standard deviation and SEM for each mean. That wasn't supposed to happen. Okay, if we were to calculate the effect size for this particular study, remember that we would have to Google an online, an app or something to calculate Cohen's d. Make sure that when you are Googling the app, that you actually put into the Google search that you're looking for a Cohen's d for a dependent t-test. If that doesn't pop up, then try paired samples. In this particular case, our Cohen's d value is 0.11, and so by going by the very loose guideline that I gave you earlier, this would be considered a very small effect size. This is reflected when we look at the actual t-test results. And so what you would want to do is you could look here first. This tells you the difference between the Colgate group and the AIM group. So you can see it's very small, right? It's negative 0.2. Whether it's positive or negative just depends on whether you did Colgate minus AIM or AIM minus Colgate. So don't worry about whether this is positive or negative. The t-value, again, it's going to be positive or negative depending on which group you subtracted from which. So don't worry about this either. But the t-value is 0.35. Remember, we round to 2 decimal places, 9 degrees of freedom, and a sig value of 0.735. This is not significant. So we can conclude that it probably makes no difference whether you use Colgate or AIM in terms of the number of cavities that you can expect. Of course, this is a hypothetical experiment, but that's what it would say. Let's look at how we would write up the results in APA style. Do you remember learning about the 5 elements in the write-up for the results? This would be a good time to practice. So if you pause the video, try and identify the 5 elements, and then resume the video. This you'll get the most benefit out of it. So I have kind of color-coded the results according to the 5 elements. And I have also included in here some procedural details that are necessary in order for the reader to understand why a dependent t-test was run on the data, even though I didn't have the same set of people in each group. All right, so let's look at these results, the write-up, that is. So the first element is to state your hypothesis, and that's in here in red. So to test the hypothesis that brand of toothpaste affects the development of cavities in kindergarten children, there's your first element. Now, this next thing is just procedural detail. It's not one of the 5 elements. It's just procedural details so that the reader, again, will understand why a dependent t-test was justified. 20 children were randomly assigned to a Colgate group or an AIM group after having first been matched on brushing frequency. Okay, so now they understand that I used a matched design. The second element is to explain what the dependent variable was. In other words, people are going to want to know what scores you analyzed. So the mean number of new cavities for the Colgate group was compared to the mean number of new cavities for the AIM group. So here this provides details on the dependent variable, and it's the number of new cavities, and we're comparing the means. And it's just conventional for t-tests to include the mean and standard deviation for each of your 2 groups. The third element is to identify the test that you used in your analysis, and that's here in pink, using a 2-tailed dependent t-test. The fourth element is to state whether it's significant or not, followed by the statistical notation. So the results were not significant. And then, the actual, the T, and then degrees of freedom, the actual value of T, and then the probability of this T value here, followed by Cohen's D. And then finally, the fifth element is to explain what this means, all this jargon, in plain, simple English, so that even grandma can understand, assuming grandma isn't a statistician or research scientist. So the layman's interpretation here would be brand of toothpaste had no effect on the development of new cavities. All right? So those are the 5 elements, and generally speaking, that's what how we write up these results section. We try and stick pretty closely to the 5 elements.